Several other FWC staff are joining me today, including Kyle Miller, Lisa Gregg, and Taylor Davis from the Division of Marine Fisheries Management. Thank you again for joining us. Your participation is very important, and we're looking forward to a productive meeting and hearing your input. The purpose of this morning's workshop is to gather feedback on Phase 2 of potential changes to the Florida Marine Special Activity License Program. The SAL program provides exceptions to state marine fisheries regulations to allow certain activities to occur. This program has been in place for more than 40 years, and in that time, the needs of both the program and of the applicants have evolved. Rules governing the SAL program have not been updated in 15 years. These rules need to be updated to accommodate new types of activities, streamline program administration, and provide more transparency for applicants. Potential changes will be presented to the FWC Commission in 2 separate phases, and public feedback gathered during this workshop will inform rule proposals to the FWC commissioners that they'll consider at their May 2025 meeting. Here's the format for today's workshop. We'll start with a presentation, and then we'll provide an overview of the Marine SAL program, the need for rule changes, and a summary of the potential rule changes to be included in the second phase of this project. After the presentation, we'll have time for questions. We'll accept questions that clarify anything in the presentation about the SAL program and potential rule changes. We may limit the amount of time allotted for questions in order to provide more time for public comment, which we'll take after we wrap up questions. We appreciate any feedback specific to the potential rule changes, but we'll accept comments on anything related to the SAL program. When providing your comment, please direct your comments to staff only. Personal attacks on staff or other participants will not be tolerated. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, I strongly suggest that you use a PC or your mobile device. The Mac computers are known to have issues with the microphone and it not unmuting when you go to speak. Once everyone has had an opportunity to comment, I'll quickly review FWC's next steps regarding the second phase of potential changes to the SAL program. Our workshop will end at noon Eastern Time at the latest. Speaking today, however, is not your only opportunity to comment on this topic. If you prefer not to speak during this workshop, you can comment online or on our website or email us at the address shown on this slide. You can also comment on this item in person at an upcoming commission meeting. And I'll be sure to share these ways to provide feedback at the end of today's workshop. At this point, I'll hand off the presentation to Kyle Miller. Kyle is a biologist with FWC's Division of Marine Fisheries Management based in Tallahassee.
Thanks, Erica, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning. I'll begin with some information about the Marine SAL program. So the program began in 1981 under the former Florida Department of Natural Resources. This program was established to allow activities that would not otherwise be allowed under state marine fisheries regulations, and it authorizes activities that benefit Florida while ensuring that Florida's living marine resources receive appropriate protections. For examples, activities in the state's best interest but are not allowed under marine fisheries regulations would include things like the operation of restoration nurseries, exhibition of prohibited shark species in public aquariums, and the relocation of organisms from planned construction areas to an area where they will not be disturbed by construction activities. SALs can be used to authorize the collection of prohibited species, waive season restrictions, size or bag limits, and authorize the use of gear that's normally prohibited. FWC staff review each application to ensure that the requested activities can be conducted appropriately and would not have unnecessary or unintended impacts. FWC oversight and regulation over these activities is important because these activities may involve prohibited species and prohibited gears, and these activities, if not conducted appropriately, could negatively impact Florida's living marine resources. SAL program staff review applications and issue approximately 400 SALs each year. There are 10 different types of licenses to accommodate a wide range of activities, including scientific research, education and exhibition, the release of marine organisms, the collection of broodstock for aquaculture, testing of innovative gear, use of non-conforming gear, and certain commercial fishing activities. The complete list of SAL types is listed on this slide. So prior to this project, rules governing the SAL program had not been updated in 15 years. Over the last year, we've identified a series of changes that are needed to improve the operation of the SAL program, to meet evolving program needs, and to provide additional transparency to applicants. These changes were divided into two separate phases for rulemaking. Phase 1 changes to accommodate new activities, streamline processes, extend certain license periods, and repeal the dredge SAL were approved by the Commission in 2024. They'll take effect later this year. We are currently developing recommendations for Phase 2, and we plan to present our recommendations at a proposed rule hearing in May. The graphics on this slide show how the proposals were divided into two phases. As previously mentioned, proposals included in Phase 1 were approved by the Commission last year. Today, we'll discuss a suite of potential proposals to be included in the second phase of this project, including topics such as updating the general genetic risk assessment flowchart, addressing the transfer and tagging of marine organisms, updates related to prohibited species, reviewing and updating incorporated policies, updating eligibility requirements for education exhibition SALs, reviewing the FMC certification process and authorizations, reorganizing non-conforming gear SAL rules into separate rules for each license type, establishing general license conditions and restrictions, and considering changes for 6 additional types, SAL types. There are a series of potential changes that would apply to the general provisions of the SAL chapter. Currently, an SAL is required to tag and release a marine organism in Florida, with an exception that allows the director of a fishing tournament to tag up to 5 fish for the purpose of awarding prizes. We're proposing to expand the exemption for fishing tournament directors to allow them to tag and release up to 5 fish per county for tournaments that occur in more than one county. Additionally, we're proposing to exempt state and federal natural resource management agencies from the requirement to obtain an SAL prior to tagging organisms. Once a person harvests an organism pursuant to an SAL and maintains that organism in captivity, typically cannot be released. Current SAL rules establish a process to provide a mechanism to formally transfer or loan organisms harvested under an SAL to another eligible facility with specific documentation requirements. We're proposing to remove the specific requirements for the formal transfer or loan of these organisms and instead use general language that will allow greater flexibility to tailor the transfer and loan requirements to each license type and specific to each requested activity as appropriate. Applicants must meet specific criteria to be eligible to apply for each SAL. These criteria include requirements for applicants to be affiliated with certain types of institutions based on the type of license sought and their requested activities. To reduce the potential for an applicant to use their affiliation to apply for personal projects that are not related to or sanctioned by their affiliated institution or organization, we propose requiring applicants to attest during the application process that the proposed activities on their application are sanctioned by and related to their role with their affiliated institution. We're also proposing to establish general license conditions that are applicable to all SAL types, but can be tailored to meet the needs of each license, such as conditions designating authorized or prohibited areas, authorized or prohibited gear, marking requirements, and reporting requirements. We'd also like to update provisions in the rule related to what we refer to as prohibited species. Currently, the term prohibited species includes any marine organism that's prohibited from harvest, possession, and sale pursuant to Commission rules or Chapter 379 of Florida statutes. The current definition does not account for species where there may be a limited harvest allowed, such as tarpon or Goliath grouper, or species that are prohibited from harvest on a regional basis, such as red drum in the Indian River Lagoon. We would like to modify the definition of prohibited species to specifically identify which species or species groups are considered prohibited species for the purposes of special activity licenses. These prohibited species would include any Florida endangered and threatened species as established pursuant to 68A 27 Florida Administrative Code, marine species federally listed as endangered or threatened under the Endangered Species Act, non-erect encrusting octocorals, common and Venus sea fans, hard and stony corals, black corals, fire corals, hydrocorals, non-aquacultured live rock, including and that would include any formations formed by certain tube worms, long spine urchins, Bahama stars, Goliath grouper, bonefish, uh, species of sharks and rays that are identified as prohibited species in the sharks rule in Chapter 68B44 Florida Administrative Code, and two spearfish, the longbill spearfish and Mediterranean spearfish. The SAL rules currently incorporate a marine prohibited species policy that was last updated in 2009. This document was intended to be used as a reference to evaluate certain types of SAL requests for a handful of prohibited species. This guidance does not address all prohibited species, it's outdated, and it's no longer necessary. The guidance provided in that document will be covered by the general application review criteria that we have to evaluate requests based on species status and other factors. In addition, we're also considering changes to allow the harvest of prohibited species for aquaculture research under an aquaculture broodstock collection SAL, as well as for emergency response under a governmental purpose SAL. And for example, that would be something to authorize local governments to remove dead fish of any species from beaches and coastal areas after fish kills. The FWC's policy on the release of marine organisms establishes criteria for when marine finfish or marine invertebrates harvested under an SAL may be released. The provisions of this policy are intended to reduce risks associated with potential for introducing or spreading diseases to wild stocks, potential adverse impacts to the genetic diversity of wild stocks, to prevent the potential of organisms treated with drugs or chemicals from being subject to human consumption after release, and to avoid potential issues with releasing predatory marine organisms that may associate humans with food. Typically, any finfish that's been maintained in captivity for longer than 30 days may not be released. We're modifying the scope of this policy to specifically apply to non-prohibited species of marine finfish and non-prohibited species of marine invertebrates. Conditions governing the release of prohibited species will be established on each license for issued prohibited species. Throughout the chapter, we refer to entities that are paid to provide services related to collection and/or transportation of marine organisms on behalf of an SAL holder as third-party contractors. To simplify rule language and reduce potential confusion, we're proposing to simply just refer to these entities as contractors. It's just a change in terminology and will not affect the impact of other rules related to third-party contractors in our SAL rules. We'll also update application forms to accommodate changes to the individual SALs. All right, so the Education Exhibition SAL allows the collection of marine organisms in support of education activities, as well as the collection of organisms for exhibition at public aquariums to increase the public's knowledge and awareness of Florida's marine resources. We propose expanding eligibility requirements for this license to allow teachers, students, or the parents or guardians of students enrolled in middle school, high school, or home education programs to apply for an education exhibition SAL in support of science fair projects. Next is the Florida Marine Science Educators Association certification, or FEMSI certification, which provides a mechanism to accommodate members of the educational community with smaller collecting needs. FEMSI certification provides exemptions to certain state and marine freshwater resource regulations and allows the collection and possession of aquatic organisms for educational purposes. Before a FEMSI certification is issued, an applicant must pay for, attend, and complete a training workshop conducted by a non-FWC entity. Currently, an educator is only eligible for the certification if they complete a workshop that's conducted by the Florida Marine Educators Association. We propose revising the framework for this authorization by clarifying that an applicant can complete a training workshop provided by a qualified Florida education organization that has entered into an agreement with FWC to provide training that meets certain criteria. We plan to work with FEMSI to initiate a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, and formalize their relationship with FWC as an approved training organization. During this process, we'll also evaluate activities and harvesting gear types that this certification authorizes. To be eligible, an applicant must be an instructor employed or sponsored by an elementary or secondary school, home education program, or an organization that provides courses on biological or aquatic studies. Because the PHMSA certification is intended specifically for educators, we're proposing to limit the eligibility for this certification to teachers and instructors from elementary and secondary schools and home education programs. Other organizations, such as private eco-tour businesses, will be directed instead to apply for the Education Exhibition SAL, which can be more tailored to a specific need or request. To reflect the possibility of having more than one approved training organization, we're suggesting renaming the PHMSA certification to Aquatic Species Collecting Certificate. The Stock Collection and Release SAL is intended to ensure that activities that involve the collection or release of marine organisms for purposes like restoration, mitigation, scientific research, and rehabilitation are conducted in a way that preserves the health and genetic diversity of wild populations. Updates to this license would include revising the application form to accommodate projects that include larval releases and creating a separate, streamlined application form for applicants conducting projects that only involve relocation activities. For all requests to release marine organisms pursuant to a stock collection release SAL, the risk of potential impacts to the genetic diversity of wild stocks is evaluated using a standardized decision-making process that's incorporated into rules of flowchart. The current flowchart depicts a high-level review process. Some SAL applicants have expressed that they find it difficult to follow and to understand the genetic risk assessment process with the information in the current chart. Therefore, we'd like to update the flowchart to include additional information for applicants, which would provide more transparency into how FWC evaluates the potential risk of requested activities. This update does not change the process for assessing genetic risk. It simply provides more details and more information to the public to increase transparency. Because of the level of detail in the updated flowchart, it's not easily displayed in the format of a virtual meeting. If you'd like to receive a copy of the updated flowchart for review, please send an email to marine@myfwc.com, the email address on your screen, and we'll make sure to get a copy of it to you. A snook SAL authorizes the harvest of snook broodstock and the production, transfer, or sale of snook broodstock progeny. A snook SAL is also issued to authorize the owner of an aquaculture facility, a private paid-fish pond, or a fully contained exhibition facility that's open to the public to purchase or receive aquaculture snook broodstock progeny. This license is intended to ensure that these activities are conducted in a manner that preserves the health and genetic diversity of wild snook in Florida. Currently, facilities eligible to purchase or receive snook broodstock progeny must be located in the same region of the state where the broodstock originated. This was intended to reduce the potential for genetic impacts to wild populations if the progeny were to escape. Because the snook fishery is now managed regionally, the rule language needs to be updated to clarify that the facility must be within the same genetic conservation unit as the source broodstock, instead of using the term region. We're also considering clarifying the eligibility criteria so that it's more easily understood that only private pond owners who operate pay-to-fish facilities are eligible for a snook SAL to purchase or receive broodstock progeny. While it's clear elsewhere in the rule that this refers to private pay-to-fish ponds, the eligibility language needs to be clarified to avoid any confusion. Other entities eligible for the snook SAL to purchase or receive broodstock progeny include operators of a certified aquaculture facility or an exhibition facility. The Marine Chemical SAL authorizes the use of chemicals like the anesthetic quinoline for the live harvest of marine organisms. This can be issued in conjunction with another SAL or in conjunction with a commercial fishing license. The current license period for a marine chemical SAL is 12 months from the date of issuance. However, some marine chemical SALs are issued in conjunction with the commercial saltwater products license, which has a license period of July 1st through June 30th of the following year. We're suggesting to update the license period to be either 12 months from issuance or to match the valid license period for the corresponding saltwater products license. Additionally, an outdated rule citation referencing the marine fisheries trip ticket system needs to be corrected. Non-conforming gear is gear that's not otherwise allowed for the recreational or commercial harvest of marine organisms in Florida, including gill nets, oversized traps, bottom grabs, dredges, long lines, etc. Non-conforming net gear, which is oversized seines or gill or entangling nets, may only be authorized for scientific research or governmental purposes pursuant to a scientific research, stock collection release, or governmental purpose SAL. Other non-conforming gear may be authorized pursuant to a gear innovation or a nonprofit corporation SAL. Currently, all of the SALs that are specific to the use of non-conforming gear, which are the gear innovation, governmental purpose, and nonprofit SALs, are housed within the same rule. To make the regulations for these SALs easier for applicants to locate, we're proposing to remove regulations for the gear innovation, governmental purpose, and nonprofit SALs into separate rules to make them easier to find and to be consistent with the organization used throughout the rest of the chapter. The gear innovation SAL allows the use, monitoring, and testing of harvesting gear that has not historically or traditionally been used within Florida. This information can be used to evaluate the impacts and efficiency of a proposed gear type to determine if the gear could be responsibly introduced into general use. This license is issued to commercial harvesters or scientific researchers, but commercial harvesters must have all required commercial licenses and documented landings of the species they intend to target with the innovative gear. The requirement for a commercial harvester to have prior landings for a targeted species is too specific and limits the ability to test gear that may be effective in emerging fisheries, like testing innovative methods to harvest non-native species like lionfish. Thus, we're exploring removal of the requirement for a commercial harvester to demonstrate prior landings for non-native species from the eligibility requirements. The governmental purpose SAL is issued to federal, state, and local governments and allows government agencies to use non-conforming gear to meet the needs of public health, safety, or welfare. To better address emergency response needs, such as the need to quickly remove dead marine organisms from beaches and coastal areas following fish kills, we propose modifying the purpose of this license to clarify that the governmental purpose SAL may be issued for the collection of prohibited species in certain cases, and to clarify that the Commission may waive certain general SAL eligibility requirements for authorized personnel when the license is issued for emergency response purposes. The nonprofit corporation SAL enables a nonprofit to operate as a biological supply organization and allows the nonprofit to use non-conforming gear to harvest marine organisms and to sell them to research, education, and exhibition facilities to financially support the nonprofit's own research, education, or exhibition programs. For this license, we would like to clean up the rule language to clarify that to be eligible for the license, the nonprofit corporation must be designated as a nonprofit pursuant to 26 U.S. Code 501c3, and it must have a current letter of tax exemption. This is already required for an organization to meet the definition of nonprofit corporation as used in the SAL rules. We're simply moving this language from the definition in 68B 8.002 Florida Administrative Code to the eligibility section of the new nonprofit corporation SAL rule to ensure that this is clear to the applicants. We'd also like to revise the reporting requirements for this license, because an applicant must also have all commercial fishing licenses, commercial endorsements, and both the wholesale and retail seafood dealer licenses to commercially harvest and sell saltwater products. We recommend that the nonprofit corporation report all organisms harvested and sold under the nonprofit SAL through the trip ticket system. During the initial round of SAL rulemaking last year in Phase 1, we received additional stakeholder requests for changes to be considered during Phase 2. 3 of these requested changes were related to the stock collection release SAL and include creating a separate type of stock collection release SAL specific to coral activities to allow an extended license period for restoration activities and to better capture criteria and license conditions applicable specifically to corals. Allowing third-party contractors to conduct coral outplanting activities, and for FWC to provide training or mentoring to restoration practitioners who wish to conduct coral outplanting. After considering these requests, we've elected not to propose these changes at this time. Coral restoration is a rapidly growing field, generating lessons learned that inform changes to best practices. We feel that it's best to maintain the 12-month license period for these activities at this time and continue licensing these activities under the stock collection release SAL. Additionally, we feel that it's most appropriate for licensed and experienced coral restoration practitioners to conduct coral outplanting activities, and FWC does not have the ability to train these restoration practitioners. We've also received requests related to the Education Exhibition SAL, with a stakeholder requesting that we require exhibition facilities with large-scale collecting needs to hire a licensed commercial marine life harvester as a third-party contractor to assist in the collection and transportation of marine organisms. Most large exhibition facilities that this would apply to already employ specialized collection teams and would not benefit from this requirement. One stakeholder requested that we provide a mechanism for smaller exhibition facilities to conduct opportunistic collections with a blanket education exhibition SAL that would allow collection of a small number of predetermined species. When reviewing these applications for exhibition facilities, the facility must specify the quantities of each species that they intend to collect, as well as the current number of each of the requested species that they already have in their facility's inventory. This information, along with information about their displays, is used to evaluate if an applicant's requested collections are necessary and appropriate. A blanket authorization would not provide for this level of review. Therefore, we're not pursuing this requested change at this time. Additionally, members of a shellfish aquaculture association have requested improvements to the processing times and the issuance of aquaculture broodstock collection SALs issued specifically for the collection of shellfish as aquaculture broodstock. Processing times were temporarily delayed due to a staffing issue that's since been resolved. We're also pursuing improvements to the SAL program administration that may improve their experience, but that do not require rulemaking. So to recap, we've discussed a lot today. We've discussed several potential changes that could be included in the second phase of this project. They're shown on the screen, and just generally updates to general rule provisions like tagging and transferability of marine organisms, ensuring that requested activities are sanctioned by an applicant's affiliated organization, establishing general conditions and restrictions applicable to all SAL types, updates to prohibited species, including clarifying the definition of what is considered a prohibited species, removing the outdated marine prohibited species policy, and authorizing collection of prohibited species under the aquaculture broodstock collection license and the governmental purpose SAL. Updates to the release policy, changing terminology related to third-party contractors, updating application forms to coincide with these rule changes, modifying eligibility requirements for the education exhibition SAL to accommodate science fair projects, reviewing and updating the framework and the process for FMSI certifications, creating a streamlined stock collection release application process for projects that only involve relocations, updating the genetic risk assessment decision process flowchart to provide additional information and transparency for applicants, clarifying and reorganizing provisions related to the Snook SAL, reorganizing non-conforming gear SAO rules, and updates to provisions related to gear innovation, governmental purpose, and the nonprofit SALs, and clarifying the license periods for the marine chemical SAL. All right, that concludes the informational portion of the workshop, and I'll hand it back over to Erica now to lead us through questions and public comment.
Thank you, Kyle. As Kyle said, we'll now take questions on the presentation and the topic of the Marine SAL program updates. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function in Microsoft Teams. When I call on you, please unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon. After asking your question, please mute yourself by clicking the microphone icon a second time. I'll then direct your question to the appropriate staff. Please be respectful of all speakers. Not everyone shares the same perspective, but everyone has the right to speak their opinion. Personal attacks against staff and attendees are unacceptable. This time is reserved for questions only, and we want to be sure to have plenty of time to take comments. So at some point, I may cut off questions if it is cutting into our public comment time. I'll call on people in the order in which they raise their hand, and I will wait to see if there's anyone who does have a question. Okay, we have a few folks with questions. The first person up is Ken Niedermeyer. Ken, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, I had a question about the nonprofit SAL. Is my understanding, I guess this is new, that at least that's what I heard, is that if a nonprofit organization applied for an SAL, they could collect stock and sell it to other organizations? And would they need a wholesale and a retail dealer license? That's my question.
Thanks, Ken. Quick answer is it's not new, but I'll turn to Lisa to provide more details on the specific SAL.
Hey, this is Kyle. Yeah, the nonprofit SAL has been around for quite a long time, and the nonprofit organization, the bylaws have to state certain functions that they operate for scientific research or exhibition, and they also are required to hold all commercial licenses and including the harvesting licenses and any endorsements for the fisheries that they'll be targeting, and as well as they have to have both the wholesale license, the wholesale dealer license, and a retail dealer license. And the this license does not authorize any collections of prohibited species.
Thanks, Kyle. The next person with a question is Cypress Rudlow. Cypress, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I'm here with Jack, our founder. Yeah, this is Jack Rudlow. I'm president of Gulf Specimen Marine Lab. My question really comes back to the notification of the Marine Patrol, essentially demanding that anybody about to go out and do research or do anything else or collect whatever it is for scientific educational purposes must first notify the Marine Patrol. This has been an old thing on the books that we have contested for over 20 years. I'm really sorry to see it's back, but I would like to know the reason why, because as far as I know, in 1970, Dr. Skip Livingston, Florida State University, went out there at night doing samples in Apalachicola Bay. And basically that someone called the Marine Patrol. And from that came all of this and years of notification for the Marine Patrol to basically ask make the researchers say, Mother, may I, can I go out there and collect or notify them, whatever it is. So I'd really like to know what's your reasoning for keeping this antiquated and unnecessary and oppressive piece of legislation in there.
Jack, thank you for your question. Kyle or Lisa, who of you would like to respond?
Yeah, and so Jack, you really did kind of touch on the purpose and the need for it. The issue is, we hear a lot from people that say you don't have enough officers on the water, and I see violations, but there's no one to respond. The intent here is the special activity licenses authorize gear and things that are not otherwise allowed. So you're doing it out in the daytime, or you're pulling traps next to a bridge in the Keys during the close season. People are going to notice, and they call our law enforcement dispatch office. And if the dispatchers have this information available, they can help triage calls and make sure that we don't send an officer out for something that is not maybe as important as another call. So it's really just to kind of give law enforcement a heads up that, hey, this activity is going to be occurring in this area today. If you get calls on that, be aware, and it will help with response times.
Thanks, Kyle. And just to reiterate, it's not a call to request permission. The permission is provided through the special activity license. It's simply a notification to law enforcement that you'll be out there conducting the authorized activities. Correct, Kyle?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Our next question comes from Andrew Baker. Andrew, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey there. Thanks. I'm actually looking at the flowchart that was referenced earlier on, and I just wanted to say that it's really good that FWC is revising this to accommodate, new science and new needs. And it's been 16 years since the 2009 one, so it's just great that this is happening. I did have a question, though, about it, which is that it refers to an assisted colonization and assisted outbreeding intervention pathway. And I'm just wondering, has a flowchart been developed for those two pathways that this flowchart directs you to, or is that yet to be developed?
Hey, Andrew, it's Lisa. We don't have additional flow charts, but what we do have is, Mike has worked on a larger document that takes this flow chart and provides more explanation. So we do have a document that breaks down the flow chart by sections and provides more description. So that while we don't have another flow chart, there will be a kind of a user document to help walk people through this. So that additional document will be provided to help people walk through the flow chart. And, I can certainly send that to you. And if you got any comments, I'd be more than happy to try and incorporate those. But that's not part of the rulemaking. That's just something we're doing as a program support document to help people out.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Andrew, for your question. Are there any additional questions from the audience? Dawn, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. When I see all the proposed changes to be, when do those proposed changes happen? Is it before the commissioners vote on it and okay it, or are they going to be changed before the commissioners approve them?
Dawn, thanks for your question. I will go ahead and answer that one. The changes must be approved by the commissioners, and in order for them to take effect, the pathway that we follow for rulemaking is a 2-hearing process. Our first hearing is staff will recommend proposed rules. That will happen at the May 2025 commission meeting. And the commission will decide upon what the proposed rules will be. And they'll make a vote at that meeting. After that vote, we will publish the notice of the proposed rules in the Florida Administrative Register. Then we will have a second hearing which is called a final rule hearing, where they will vote on the final rules. And after that final rule hearing, the rules will take effect. And we'll revisit those next steps at the end of this workshop. All right, I am not seeing any additional questions, so we will move into public comment. We would appreciate your input on the potential SAL program changes presented this morning, and any other suggestions for the SAL program that you may have. As we did with questions, please use the raise hand function in Microsoft Teams to indicate that you'd like to speak. I will call on people in the order in which they raise their hands. Once your name is called, click on the microphone icon and unmute yourself and provide your public comment. Once finished, please click on the microphone icon to mute yourself again. To allow the greatest number of commenters, we ask you to keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. If we have a large number of people who raise their hands to provide comment, we may need to further limit the amount of time per person to ensure everyone has the opportunity to speak. We will recognize each speaker once. or comment. And if you're in a group of people with a shared device, we will only recognize that user once. If there are other people in your group who would like to provide comment, they'll need to join the workshop from their own device. When it's your turn to provide comment, please state your name and affiliation for the record. You'll see a timing light on the screen. That's the green circle on this slide. It will turn yellow when you have 1 minute remaining, and it will turn red when your allotted time is up. If you have a microphone issue or your computer does not have a microphone, please email your comment to marine@myfwc.com. Also, if you are on an Apple computer, we recommend you switch to a smartphone to join the meeting. You will likely have problems unmuting yourself because Teams and the Microsoft computers don't seem to get along. This meeting will end at noon Eastern time. We'll allow as many speakers as possible to provide comments until that time. With that, we will go to our first speakers. Don, go ahead and unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Hi, thank you. When the changes to the education exhibition / aquatic species certification has been approved, will the differences between them be outlined in detail, meaning the criteria for each of them? Because I haven't been able to find them online to see who exactly is eligible for what and what the actual differences are between them, so that people are aware of which ones they are able to do, as well as proper training for either one of them. It just make it a lot easier for the general public to be able to see and compare the two to know which one that they would fall under and for what reasons they would fall under each. That's it.
Thank you, Don, for your comments. Cypress Redlow.
Hi, this is Hunter Eichler with Gulf Specimen Marine Lab. With regard to the current proposed changes to Rule 68B-8.01, GSML is in favor of retaining the prior language from Rule 68B-8.013, which required a special activities license holder to hold the applicable wholesale and retail dealers licenses and hold the applicable commercial harvesting licenses, permits, or endorsements required for the fishery requested for harvest and sale pursuant to the SAL. In addition, GSML is in favor of allowing harvesting under the SAL in areas currently closed to the public for harvesting. And finally, Gulf Specimen Marine Lab opposes the requirement that it must notify FWC of its intentions to harvest within 24 hours prior to doing so. GSML considers that requirement to be too onerous, and GSML would not oppose reporting via an electronic mail system or an annual float plan.
Thank you for that comment. Next, we have someone with their name listed as Matanzas Riverkeeper. Could you please state your name before giving your comment? It looks like they put their hand down. Whoever's with the Matanzas Riverkeeper here to give comment today, if you would like to give comment, go ahead and raise your hand back up. If not, you're welcome to email us at marine@myfwc.com. So we'll go to Andrew Baker next.
Thanks, Andrew Baker, University of Miami Rosenstiel School of Marine, Atmospheric and Earth Science. So as I already mentioned, I applaud FWC for deciding to update their flowchart to take account of the changing times we live in, the threats to coral reefs particularly, and my comments really have to do with coral restoration. I feel that there may be a greater perceived agreement between the community and FWC over these activities than perhaps there actually is. And I would encourage FWC to reach out and engage with interested scientists, in particular, the genetics working group of the Core Restoration Consortium, to make sure that there really is the level of agreement and discussion that I think could and should go into the development of these flowcharts, as well as into the assisted colonization and assisted outbreeding flowcharts. And I would encourage FWC to hold an in-person workshop, if possible, to really hear from all of the interested parties here to make sure that when this is finalized, that we have really a consensus document that has been well thought out and really reflects the range of expertise that is available to the state of Florida to help advise on this process.
Thank you for your comments, Andrew. Again, if you'd like to provide public comment today, please raise your hand to indicate you'd like to speak. I'm not seeing any additional hands, so we will move forward to next steps. This completes the formal comment session. Thank you to everyone for providing comment and spending your morning attending our workshop. We'll continue to gather public feedback on SAL program updates. So if you or someone you know would like to provide additional comments, there are more opportunities to weigh in. You can email comments to marine@myfwc.com, or you can submit a comment through our comment portal at myfwc.com/saltwater comments. Staff will summarize the feedback gathered during this workshop and through additional feedback channels and present a summary of them and recommendations for proposed rules to our commissioners at their May 2025 commission meeting. If the commission approves proposed rules for publication, we'll then gather additional public comment and hold a final public hearing at a meeting later in 2025. We appreciate your questions and feedback today. It provides important information that staff considers when developing our rule recommendations for the commission. This concludes this morning's workshop. Thank you again for everyone to take the time to join us, and I hope you have a great day and nice weekend.